The last talk in this session before lunch is Hassan Malik, whom we've heard from on and off over the last day or so. And he touches on a subject which, again, we've mentioned in passing in many different ways, centers of expertise. But in the next 20 minutes, he's going to nail it for us.
It's getting close to lunch. It won't be 20 minutes. This was the title I was given. I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer that, to be honest, but anyway, we'll have a go. So why? So when I first met Helen, it was at the kind of hepatobility subgroup, and she was part of this cancer 52 grouping, and obviously cholangiocarcinoma was in there. It's a rare cancer, but the reality is it probably isn't as rare as we thought. And I'm going to plagiarize MMF's data, and this is it. Essentially, a lot of patients with this cancer, and getting the message back out there, half the patients don't get any treatment whatsoever. That could be your mother, father, brother, sister. A handful get an operation. But as I discussed this morning, when you look at patients who've had a stent and an operation, then that really is a kind of specific for patients with perihilar cholangiocarcinoma, a really, really small percentage of patients getting that type of operation in particular. So that's the reality at the moment. And I have to thank colleagues. So Danny Gomez from Nottingham, who I believe is online, and also Jane from Belfast. They set up this kind of hepatobility surgical collaborative, and this is data around intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma. And they were able to get almost 700 patients worth of data. A lot of patients here didn't have surgery due to reasons like metastatic disease, frailty, whatever, but the surgical patients were almost 300, and I think about 20% or 25% of those came from Liverpool. And this is what we found. Hospitals are doing different volumes of liver surgery in the UK, and they're doing different volumes of intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma surgery in the UK as well, per year, on average. But interestingly, there was variability in how we stage the disease, whether we do removal of the lymph nodes for this disease, because that can help with the prognostic aspects, and how we treat the patient after the surgery in terms of chemotherapy. So that was interesting. The other thing, this is old data, but it's interesting that this is data based on HES, which is Hospital Ipsos Statistics. And there's a problem with HES-based data. I know some of that probably was used in the MMF study, but coding can be wrong, whether it be for diagnosis or for treatment. But essentially, in this project, they did find patients allegedly with cholangiocarcinoma. And what you saw is this. So I'm assuming that the incidence of cholangiocarcinoma in London is similar to that in Manchester or Liverpool. But if you look at the centres, different rates of surgeries. So is this due to miscoding or untreated or undertreated patients? We don't know. But also interestingly, when you look at surgical outcomes, there were clearly inaccurate data. Patients having surgery with no mortality, I think that is just, data is wrong. But also some centres doing kind of relatively low volumes of surgeries with like 25% mortality. So that's interesting, but again, the problem is the quality of the data. And again, it goes back to, interrogating this data further, and the kind of HPB collaborative is now going to start to look prospectively at hilar cholangiocarcinoma data as well, but going back to 2014. So I think that'll be quite important. When you look at international data, this is data from across the globe, essentially focusing on intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma. And they thought, okay, it'd be a good idea to get a composite outcome of this fantastic result, which is you've removed all the cancer and the patients have not had any significant complications. And when you look at that, essentially what you're seeing is that as unit volumes go up, generally the performance is better. We also know, this is again data from the US, that a lot of cases from their databases, but again, the suggestion that if you're doing more surgery in your hospital, your results are better. And they would imply that you need to be doing a minimum of 14 operations for all types of cholangiocarcinoma annually. And there's more recent data that, again, would be consistent with doing more gets you better results. But all this is about essentially variation in healthcare. And the key thing is this: we want the right type of variation, which is what we saw John and Juan and colleagues talk about, which is that personalized medicine, that you get the right targeted treatment for your cancer. So it's that is appropriate variation. But what we want to try and avoid is a type of variation which is based on lack of knowledge and expertise. So I think that's the key thing. So centres of expertise, why and why now? Well, basically this. We've kept talking about these guidelines, and it's a pity we haven't had more information about them. They will be published, I'm sure, but it was myself and Derek Manis were leading on the surgical bit, and essentially we had a lot of discussion and debate about surgery and surgical volumes and things like that, and whether that should be in the guidelines. But ultimately we came as a group, and Helen was part of that, to this conclusion that really surgery for this disease should be undertaken at high volume centres with expertise. And that's the key message. You need to have expertise in how to manage this. And it's the whole team, not just the surgeon. So how do we define this? Well, clearly, I guess at a basic level, it's about clinical outcomes, But when we look at that, and we look at what happens in the UK, there was the commissioning of HPB services, and they produced a document about how to define HPB services. Well, it's actually in England, actually. And in that document, there was a number of quality metrics, but nothing about cholangiocarcinoma. I don't think it was even mentioned in the whole thing. So clinical outcomes is one. Clearly, research and innovation. This meeting is about innovation, and we can't move things forward without innovating. So that is crucial. And I think ultimately, education and training is part of that as well. I mean, as surgeons, and I've said this many times before, as surgeons, you do not leave a great work of art. The only thing you can do is to train the next generation to be better than you are. And certainly, if people come to Liverpool as senior trainees, they will be involved in the management of cholangiocarcinoma and be trained on how to undertake these complex and high-risk operations. And then when you kind of triangulate all that, hopefully in the middle is your centre of expertise or excellence, however you want to define it. But importantly, you've got the whole team around you. So in conclusion, because I think it's important to have a good discussion rather than me waffling on, I think cholangiocarcinoma surgery, and you're going to be hearing about surgery from John and others later on, is all about planning. You need to predict and take steps to avoid those complications, but you need to be surrounded by that skilled team. So I think this is the start of the conversation. Thank you much.